Can he breathe?
You've been trained to crave jump scares and gore. But Hereditary did something far more disturbing.
Why are you scaring me?
It didn't show you the monster. It made you feel like you were the thing being watched. And in the process, it crossed a line most filmmakers are too terrified to even admit exists. The most disturbing thing about Hereditary is that the horror doesn't begin on screen. It's already in motion before you even press play. You don't witness the curse starting. You just arrive. Right as it's tightening, it doesn't open with screams or blood. It opens with a newspaper clipping, an obituary, but not for a main character. It's for Ellen Lee, the family's grandmother, someone who should be fading from memory. But in this story, she's the origin point, and her shadow is still spreading. That obituary isn't just a scene. It's a warning you don't realize you've been given. The story has already started. You're entering on page 10, and your brain, it starts clawing at the walls, searching for what it missed. That panic doesn't go away, because Hereditary was built to make you feel late. Like the movie knows something you don't. Like you're always one beat behind a scream. Then the camera plays its first trick, a slow, hypnotic push into what looks like a dollhouse. But it keeps going and going until suddenly you're inside it. Peter's dad walks in like a puppet, pre-programmed, like someone wound him up and hit play. It's not just a stylish transition. It's the film's secret whispered out loud. These people aren't living. They're being operated, watched, manipulated. Every move, pre-written. The shots reinforce it. Miniature rooms, rigid symmetry, perfect angles like exhibits on display. Even when nothing is happening, you feel like you're being watched. Annie, Peter's mom, builds miniature scenes for a living. But they aren't innocent. They're shrines to trauma, frozen replicas of moments that should be unbearable. And she doesn't make them to understand them. She builds them to trap them, to convince herself the pain is sealed in glass. But here's the nightmare. The trauma isn't dead. It's evolving, feeding. The curse doesn't want to be displayed. It wants to reproduce. And this is where Ari Aster stops using horror tropes and starts using psychological warfare. Even the conversations feel cursed. The family sits in silence. Every word is a misfire. No warmth, no comfort, just tension. Like they're speaking through fog. It's not grief that makes them this way. It's something colder. That unspoken grief. The kind that doesn't make you cry. It makes you shut down, where no one talks about the dead, because they were already gone long before the funeral. This is the true horror Hereditary drills under your skin. What if the real curse isn't a demon? What if it's emotional silence, passed down like DNA? Even the house feels wrong. Not like a home, more like a mechanism, a spiritual machine built for something. The rooms are too clean, the shadows too symmetrical, and outside, the tree house glows like a ritual site, like the family is being arranged. Arranged for what? You don't know, but your gut does. Something is coming, and the film never lets you forget it. Because Hereditary doesn't follow the usual rhythm of horror. It doesn't build dread. It opens with it, and never lets you leave. And that constant suffocating tension, it bleeds into the characters, especially Annie. Because Hereditary doesn't just trap you in dread, it traps her too. Annie Graham isn't your typical horror movie mother. She's not screaming at ghosts or saving her kids. She's quietly imploding. From the second she opens her mouth at the grief support group, you know something's wrong. But not in the horror movie way, in the I've met this person in real life way. She starts calm, too calm, and then she drops an emotional nuke. Her mother's mental illness, her brother's suicide, her father starving himself to death. And she says all of it like she's reading a grocery list. No crack in her voice, no flicker of emotion. Just a woman explaining horror like it's routine. That's not bad acting. That's brilliant horror. Because Annie has buried her pain so deep, she doesn't recognize it as pain anymore. To her, this is just Tuesday. She doesn't even cry when her daughter dies. Not because she doesn't care, but because grief has become background noise to her life. So instead of breaking down, she builds a miniature of the scene. She recreates her daughter's decapitation as a dollhouse model, painstakingly detailed. And when her husband gets horrified, she looks confused, as if she genuinely doesn't understand why this is wrong. This is Annie's tragedy. She thinks she's processing her trauma by containing it, but in trying to control pain, she loses her grip on reality. And then comes the dinner scene. No ghosts, no demons, just a mother and son, and decades of emotional rot on the table. It starts with chewing, that unbearable silence. You feel the tension before anyone speaks. Then Peter breaks it, and Annie snaps, not like a horror movie jump scare, like a pressure valve finally exploding. She doesn't just yell, she surgically dissects him, each word trembling with rage that's been marinating for decades. But here's what makes it so disturbing. She doesn't want to say any of it. You can see her fighting herself, but she has to. It's been rotting inside her too long. She doesn't scream that like a parent demanding respect. She screams it like someone begging the universe to prove they exist. Because Annie doesn't know how to be a mother. Not because she's a monster, but because no one ever taught her how. She was raised by a narcissist. Her childhood was a factory for emotional repression. So now, she builds dollhouses and miniatures, safe little replicas where she's in control. But she's not in control. She's just shrinking her pain into something she can hold. And in the process, she's raising children inside a house, soaked in inherited suffering. This is why Annie is terrifying. Not because she's evil, but because she's unconscious. She's sleepwalking through life. Annie is written like a time bomb. You know she's going to break, but you don't know when. And the worst part, neither does she. She's grief, personified. A daughter, a mother, a wife, but more than anything, she's a container carrying decades of family trauma and leaking poison onto everyone around her. So by the time she's floating silently in the attic, sawing through her own neck with a piano wire, it doesn't feel like a plot twist. It feels like the only possible ending, because Annie's horror was never about being possessed. It was about finally becoming what she feared she always was. She wasn't taken by a demon. She just stopped pretending she wasn't one. And the most disturbing part, you were never looking at the real monster. Because when Hereditary hit theaters, the world was watching Charlie, the awkward girl with the dead stare, the one who cuts bird heads off for fun, the one you just know is going to snap and kill someone. So you watch her closely, every twitch, every click of her tongue, every shot that lingers just a little too long. Because Hereditary wants you to think she's the problem. But then, 30 minutes in, she's dead, not possessed, not gradually corrupted, not part of some slow burn demonic reveal. Just dead, headless, in the backseat, like she was never the main character at all. Just a body, used to blind us from the real evil. This isn't just a plot twist, it's a psychological betrayal. You, the viewer, were tracking the wrong horror. Because Charlie's death isn't the end of something, it's the activation of everything. That moment, when her head hits the pole, it's not an accident. It's the first open move in a game her family never knew they were already losing. Rewind. That telephone pole. It's marked, carved with the same occult symbol we see later. Which means one thing. This wasn't random. This was orchestrated. Charlie had to die. But not for horror. For ritual. And even after that, the film doesn't relax. It compresses. It tightens around your chest. Because now, grief is the monster. This is where Hereditary turns. It takes your belief that Charlie was important and flips it into something worse. What if she was never important at all? Annie finds photos of her mother, surrounded by cultists. All of them are celebrating. And suddenly, it's not just a photo, it's a prophecy. And that's when it hits you. Charlie was never safe. She was never even Charlie. She was being used since birth, groomed, not by ghosts, by the people she trusted most. Charlie's soul was never meant to stay. It was just a placeholder for someone else, for something else. King Paimon, a demon who needs a male body to manifest, which means Charlie was never supposed to survive. And Peter, he's the real prize. He's been marked since the beginning. So what does that mean? It means Charlie's life, her awkwardness, her isolation, wasn't tragedy. It was design. She was born to be discarded. She was a vessel. Her brother is the throne. And you were tricked into caring about the wrong story. Because that's the genius of Hereditary. It weaponizes empathy. It uses your feelings as bait. You're too busy feeling sad for Charlie to see what's actually happening. And by the time you look away from her, it's already too late. And the worst part, you were supposed to fall for it. Because this story was never about Charlie. It was always about you. And that's why it hurts. Because while you were watching Charlie, you didn't notice what was really happening. Most people didn't. They walked out of the theater talking about demons, decapitations, and levitations. But they missed the horror hiding in plain sight. None of that was the scariest part of Hereditary. In fact, the demon isn't even the villain. The real horror is that this family never stood a chance. The scariest part is the design. Every moment of their lives, pre-engineered. Every tragedy, placed like a prop in a dollhouse. And that's not metaphor. It's the message. Aster doesn't tell you the theme. He shows it before you even realize what you're looking at. This family isn't living in a home. They're trapped in a replica. That opening shot, it wasn't decoration. It was a warning. The camera glides into a dollhouse and the miniature bedroom becomes real. That wasn't a cool transition. It was the film whispering to you, this isn't a life, it's a set. Their fate is already built and someone else is pulling the strings. Ellen, Annie's mother, wasn't just overbearing. She was the architect. She bred Annie like livestock, pressured her into having children, attached herself to Charlie, ignored Peter, and then died right on cue so the cult could finish what she started. Look closer. That symbol, it's everywhere. The pole that killed Charlie, the welcome mat, the attic door, the book of invocations. These aren't Easter eggs. They're ownership tags. The cult owns this family, their house, their children, their pain. So when Annie starts unraveling and Peter gets stalked by that flickering light, it's not a haunting, it's a harvest. Peter loses control of his body. Annie loses control of her mind. And we, the audience, lose control of the story. Because Hereditary isn't about fear. It's about inevitability. You think demons are the threat? No. The threat is order. That every scream, every tragedy, every death was scheduled. They were born inside a blueprint. Annie, Peter, Charlie, all of them walked the same road. The same road as Annie's father, and Annie's brother, and Annie's mother, who paved it. So when Peter opens his eyes at the end and sees a treehouse full of smiling nude strangers, he isn't shocked, he isn't scared, because Peter is gone. Just like Charlie was never really Charlie. That's the real horror. Not possession, not death, but the idea that your body is just a vessel, that your soul is a hand-me-down, that from the moment you were born, you were never yours. And through it all, Peter says nothing, because there's nothing left to say. He isn't Peter anymore. He's a vessel for the demon king Paimon, a god that only enters the broken. And the cult? They're not just worshipping him. They're celebrating what they did to his family. And that's where Hereditary becomes something else. Not the scariest horror film, the most inescapable, the most hopeless, the kind that turns your own mother into the architect of your destruction. Hereditary doesn't end. It claims you. So when the screen cuts to black, there's no relief, no resolution, no survival, just silence. Because Hereditary doesn't let you breathe. It doesn't give you closure. It leaves you in the same place as Peter, powerless, stripped of control, just a passenger. And maybe that's why this movie doesn't just hurt. It stays. But here's the question no one wants to ask. If this film is so traumatic, so violating, why do we watch it? Why do we love it? Click the next video to uncover the disturbing reason horror hits so deep and what that says about you.